Shalom, y'all. Welcome back to NETIV on Wednesday night. Tonight's subject is a continuation. I'm continuing what I started when I began last week, and actually I began 2 weeks ago, began to talk to you about the understanding of light and sound, how they're found within the Bible, and trying to give you some understanding of, well, there's a lot of commonality between all of the major religions. And you're going to hopefully get a picture of that as we go along. Tonight's focus is Genesis chapter 1, sound. That's what we're going for. That's what I want you to begin to understand is sound. Well, there it is. Come on, open up. There you go. So now all I got to do is, I had it set up and now it's not set up anymore. So let's go to slideshow and let's go to from the current slide. Okay. What we're looking at here is sacred geometry. Now, I talked about sacred geometry with light last time, but I want to go back and give you kind of a slur between light and sound. Everything in creation can be reduced down to an atom. Everything. Now, we might see an atom as a geometric shape, but it's even more than that, because you can actually look at it and see what we started with last week, sacred shapes, sacred geometry. What you see here in this picture is a slice of DNA. Now, this slice is not lengthwise, but it is cutting across. But what I want you to notice especially is that picture right there at the center of the flower is right there. This is what DNA looks like. Same thing as when we looked at it in light. It is one of those things that becomes very obvious that there's something there. Everything, therefore, is going to be based on geometry. Everything. That's why Aristotle and all of those Greek understood the fact that this sacred flower becomes very, very important when we're talking about what's going on. Now, the Russian scientist is the one who cut the slice and created the picture that I'm showing you right now. And what we normally think of when we look at a DNA slice, a chromosome, we usually think of it as being a double helix. In other words, it's two ladders with strands in between all the way up. Well, there actually are 13 strands. Only 2 of them are thick. The others are wrapped around the 2. And so that's why you see what you see. But this is called, by the Russian scientist, and I cannot remember his name, this is called the flower of life. And you can see why. Now, as we go through this, now if I can get it to move, what we're going to do is we're going to compare sound to light. Now, we both know that light comes in waves. Light waves are a type of electromagnetic waves. That is, the response, they cause a sensation to your sight. The waves can travel through a vacuum of space, allowing us to observe objects in space from a distance. That's why we see the stars that are probably, many of them are no longer there. Sound, on the other hand, is a mechanical wave, a little bit different, but both travel in waves, and they require a medium or something to travel through. Now, science is beginning to question whether sound is not found in space, because of the fact that space is not considered empty any longer. Dust particles from the sun and all kinds of things are actually floating in that substance. But the idea is, because of this mechanical waves, this medium that it's passing through, it creates vibrations. The same thing you see when you pluck a guitar or when you blow a horn or whatever have you. And the fact that these waves allow us to hear sound, from the softest sound to the blast, or what I would call the Big Bang. We only hear on a small range of frequencies, but we do hear. So as we're going through it, hear a sound in space as understood by science. It's invisible, and yet it's still real. Though it is invisible, most definitely exists and exerts pressure on our physical reality. This is an accepted fact and is a point well worth contemplating. Imagine that if you could have seen that sound in space. That sound is the sound of radiation. That's what you're looking at. Notice the geometric patterns. Do you see them? Most geometric patterns that you're going to see are going to have, if you look at the center of the object, you're going to see a cross at the center. You're also going to be able to see what we would call backwards and forwards, sideways. So we have up and down, we have north and south, east and west, and we have those that are going sideways. Something to look at. Now, creation's a language, and so is sound. So when we go back to the beginning, for this portion, I want to go back to the New Testament, because I think there's something in the book of John, the Gospel of John, that is significant. And I also think it's very Kabbalistic, not just simply because it's there, but there's a lot of mystical understanding that's still in the book of John. It's not totally correct, not by my understanding, but this one sentence, John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. Now, if we substitute the word with energy, because you see, God is energy. And so in the beginning, there is energy. The energy is found in a microscopic dot that's there in the center. This microscopic dot will eventually explode. And as it does, it moves throughout. And so the Word was with God, and the Word went out from God. In other words, he started the Big Bang. Now, I want to give you something else. Gematria, which is the Greek word, would be geometry, but the Hebrew word is gematria. I want us to look at the gematria, the geometry of Genesis 1:1 and Exodus 20, verse 1. Now, if we look at 1:1, you already know it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But if you looked at it in Hebrew, and I gave it to you in that second line in Hebrew, and I'm sure most of you won't be able to read it, but it's basically saying, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim va'et aretz. Now, what's important about it is the fact, the number of letters and words, because you see, the first Bible scholars, the original Hebrews, spent a lot of time not looking at it in the language that we look at it in, but they looked at it in a mathematical language. They began to notice the spaces between words. They identified, in this particular case, there were 7 words and there were 28 letters. And those 28 letters, that first words that went from God's mouth, because you see, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. How did he do it? He spoke it. It was the word. It's 1 John 1:1. That's what was going on. So you begin to get an idea. Now, they would go on to the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 1, and they're looking again. And now this time they find the first verse, it says, God spoke all these words to respond. What words did he speak? He spoke the 10 commandments. How many utterances are there in the book of Genesis in that first chapter? 10. How many commandments are there? 10. Now, if you look again, I put down on that 4th line and the beginning of the 5th line, I wrote out for you the Hebrew. Again, you're going to see that there are 7 words and 28 letters. In other words, there is a comparison. between the two. And actually, the two of them match up because God spoke the 10 commandments, even if he only spoke 2 out loud. He spoke the commandments, and at the same time, in the beginning, he spoke the world into existence. Everything comes from a command. God commanded at that point in time. So the 10 utterances are right there for us. Now, I was going through looking at, is God the only God in creation? And so I looked, after reminding myself, the book of Genesis chapter 6 deals with Noah's Ark. How many cultures actually have an ark or a boat that goes with it? And you find out that almost all cultures do. Well, if almost all cultures have boats, almost all cultures probably have a creation story. Now, I can't tell you I looked at every possibility, but I found several that prove my point. The first one is in Egypt, it was Fada. Now, Fada is only one of their Egyptian gods, but he is known as the god of technology. Time out. How could he be known as the god of technology 4,000 years ago? What technology did he know? That took me back to the pyramids. That took me back to Giza. That took me back to the astronomy that we were looking at. So he's the god of technology who felt in his heart, in his being, at some point, something was happening, and he spoke it into existence. He spoke it into existence. Brahmanism, India, Tibet. Brahmanism's the idea of the beginning came from Brahman. In that, in the beginning, he spoke everything into being. Now, Brahman, remember, if we go back, Brahman was one name that we should be able to recognize if we put an A in front of it. Abraham. From Abraham's children, we now begin to see correlations to creation. But the Pueblo Indians have nothing to do with what's going on in the Middle East. But the Pueblo Indians talk about a spider who sang the world into existence. Singing. And I want you to keep that point in your head. The Aztecs, the Aztec god Quetzalcoatl, blew onto a conch shell, and he created the first waves of life. He didn't speak it, he sounded it. And we're going to get into that as we go along. The Inuit Indians tell us that the raven created the heavens and the waters with the sound of his beating wings. Again, sound. And finally, the rainbow serpent that's there holds a great significance to the Australian Aborigines. It's known as the Aboriginal Creator God. So it's the rainbow serpent that created life as we know it. As I was going along, I came across one that fascinated me. And it may not fascinate you as much as it did me, but I gave you a couple pictures to look at. This is called mandala art, and it's a Tibetan art. As you watch the monks, they're working on creating their own version of a mandala. A mandala is a painting, not an ordinary painting, but it's painted out of sand, colored sand. So you imagine how long it takes them to put together one of these. And I gave you another example down below. They're all different, but they have several things that are in common. Can you see the geometric shapes? Can you see them? Can you see the cubes? Can you see the triangles, the pyramids? All of those shapes are in there. And you've got even smaller ones if I could have enlarged it. Now, the history of this language is the fact that it originally came from India, and the word mandala simply means circle. So you can see that everything began with the circle. If we go back to light, remind yourself, and if we go back to the original flower of life, the original flower started out as a germ, a circle with a dot in the center. That's how they began. Can you see the circle that starts each of these mandala? Now, I only gave you 2 examples. You can go online and look up mandala and look for image, and you will find at least another 150 more. They're all different. None of them are alike. But what struck me, got me started, was Nikola Tesla was fascinated by what he saw. And that sound plays a role in this process. And so it was here that he connected light with sound, and he announced that in order to understand creation, you needed to understand energy, vibration, and frequency. That's the point I want to make with this set of drawings. Here's some more sand paintings for you. And again, they're all a little bit different. Again, can you see the fact of the geometric shapes that are within it? Everything is geometric. Everything has a center point. And a center point, if I could have gotten them larger, you would have seen a dot. That's where it all started. And as they are building these mandalas, they begin with the dot and they begin to build out. And the question comes, how did they do that? Or where's their pattern coming from? As they're building these, the Tibetans begin to tell us their forefathers were speaking to them and guided them through this process of creating their mandala. And that's why they're all different. It's a process that they go through. But not only do the Tibetans go through it, but Buddhas also follow the same pattern. It's something that is ingrown or bred across the entire eastern part of the world. It's everywhere on the east. Everybody's familiar with that sign, the yin and the yang of it. Communication or thought and behavior has a frequency. What had also been identified is the fact that words we speak, or the expressions or the strength of our voices in the words, our mind deals with confusion and static in our vocalization. Sight is seen as a masculine thing, but sound is feminine. Sound is feminine. In the Eastern cultures, again, sound is seen as being more dependable than your sight. And that's where we get this artwork. Now, the foundational principle of Chinese philosophy and Chinese medicine is yin and yang. It's based upon a balance between the two. They're not separable. As you can see, they're part of the same circle. In this case, you have 2 dots. You also have 2 basic colors. And you notice that the basic colors, the dot inside the other color, is opposite. Now, if you're going to look at this from any length of time, you're going to see that yin, and if I could help you understand, yin speaks to the idea of light, or the idea of no shade. The black, on the other hand, is the yang, and that's shaded area. Well, in Chinese medicine, we understand that we have good and we have evil within us. So the black dot represents, inside of yin, represents the evil that we have within us. The white dot represents the good that even the evil people have within them. Yin and yang were a natural part of the process of prayer that they would go through and still go through even today. It's a part of their medicine system, a part of their medicine system. My last years as a principal were getting hard. So my wife and I, well, my wife took me a couple of times, and then I began to go by myself, went to Michigan, not far, an hour from where I live, to a Chinese acupuncturist. She was the 5th generation of her family to have that profession. She had only been in the United States for approximately 10 to 15 years. Before she came to the United States, she worked in a hospital. She was the anesthesiologist in a Chinese hospital. As an anesthesiologist, you didn't give them a medicine or a mask or put anything into their system. It was all done with acupuncture and sound. One of the basic sounds that we were going to get into as we go along. That was how medicine was handled. Little ears do hear. Imagine for a minute that when an embryo is forming and it's only 1 millimeter in length. 1 millimeter. That's not an inch. 1 millimeter. At that point, 2 bones are already beginning to grow. Those are the ocular bones that are in the inner ear. From the earliest points on, that child is hearing. Now, it can't see, can't taste, can't smell, has no touch, but it can hear. You see, by the time the baby reaches 24 weeks, all 5 senses are there, but still only one is operating. And so the question is, why does that one system still operate? Well, that's easy enough. Because of the fact that that baby's neural net system is literally drawing information. When a person speaks, depending on what language they use, there are basically 40 different character sounds that words can be made out of. Here in English, we have 26. Chinese have all 40. Their problem is that their R's and their L's sound exactly alike. So you have to understand language in each culture is a little bit different. But that baby from the very beginning is already building a vocabulary. Does it know how to speak a vocabulary? No, because it doesn't know how to control its lips, doesn't know how to control its tongue, but it does know how to make noise. And that's what it does do. It does create noise. So in many cultures then, this idea is that we begin with the understanding that the baby begins to hear. I don't know how many of you talked to your baby when it was still within your womb, ladies. Obviously, the men can't, but if they were married to a woman who was pregnant, did they talk to the baby? In other words, communication is important to them from the very earliest. That's where they begin to understand. They also can understand in the earliest moments loud noises and soft noises. They can understand anger and they can understand love. That's all being built into the neural nets. That's all that's there. Also, if we looked at the human brain, your ears have 3 connections with that brain. Your sight has only 1 optical nerve connection to the brain. 3 times more important. So when we stop to think about it, we have to understand something rather special. First off, sound in the very beginning is crucial. But have you gone to a funeral? Why do we sing to dead people? Why do we go through that whole process? Do they hear us? There is some understanding that our sense of hearing is still functioning, even though the heart is not beating. It continues to function after that. Why is that? I don't know. Couldn't find anybody who could understand or could explain it to me, but the understanding is we are not the only culture that practices it. We know in Hebrew, when a person dies, his good and evil has not finished because we as friends and relatives speak of that person. And by speech, we add to or subtract from their end. Okay, to get back to an earlier thought, sound causes creation. The sound effects of creation are what we call cosmic or quantum physics. It's the sound of waves and particles. That's what's going on. So we have this culture. What I want to go through now is just understand. I started with referring to Genesis and Exodus and the role in creation and 10 commandments, but there's more to that, because if you could read the Hebrew in the Bible, you would begin to understand that they don't read Hebrew in a synagogue. They sing. When I was in Israel, in Shiloh, I went to a school. Second graders walked into the class, and they were going through their textbook, their reading book. They were reading Genesis chapter 6. How were they reading it? They were singing it. Now, they had to have help because they're just learning the language, so the help came from the teacher. The teacher acted as a cantor. A cantor becomes very significant in their understanding. When we think about the Jewish people, we think that they all understand Hebrew and know Hebrew. And the answer is not really. Not many do. In fact, after the temple burned down the second time, the Hebrew language was lost. It was kept alive by only a small group of people. And it wasn't until early in the 20th century that they literally began to get that language back. So Hebrew is a language of cantoring. It's a language where scholars and theologians, they practice this understanding of frequencies, because you see, the cantor is dealing in frequencies. The very frequencies used in music to heal and to lift up the soul. Can you not think of a song that you sing or that you hum that doesn't do something to your soul? Way back when, or the last time I can find where it's literally carried in the music, is the Gregorian chants. You see, the Gregorian chants followed the line of the Solfeggio frequencies. It's a spiritual and a healing sound. Also understand, those bells that used to ring in the old churches? That's a sound frequency carried in the same order as a Gregorian chant. The frequencies are original to the Bible. The frequencies resonate with energy, and this energy moves through your body. And that's when your soul begins to be invigorated, and you create a balance within yourself from that music. Now, I myself cannot sing. In fact, I don't sing. I don't even hum because I can't. But in the evening, before I go to bed, I will listen to music in basic frequencies, and I'll talk to you about those frequencies as we go along. So analyzing specific verses and passages in the Bible are going to reveal deeper spiritual and healing understandings that we don't get now. I remember when I was in the synagogues in Israel, it was during the week of Sukkot. So they had services every night. And I went to an Orthodox service. I went to a Reform service. And I went to a, liberal services. And I can't think of the name of it. But I went to all the services. In the Orthodox, any of the men were allowed to come up and actually chant or sing the words to the verses that they were reading. In the other two, they had a cantor. They had somebody who was specialized and able to do that. Now, not only were their readings that way, but also many of their prayers. If you watch the men at the Wailing Wall, you begin to see them chanting or cantoring and singing as they're standing there. Now, this whole idea is the character who's doing this is called a Hazan. He is the one that is certified in most cases, in two of the churches to do such a thing. But that's something that's been carried on, not so much in an Orthodox. So today the congregations have these specialists who do this. But the idea is the cantering can cause us, if you understand the language, to go deeper into a text and to get lost in something that you're hearing. Speaking of getting lost, what I have for you here as you look at the top of this is salt. This salt was placed on a vibrating plate. And as you look at it, you begin to see that salt doesn't always end up in the same pattern. Why? Because salt on these plates vibrated at different frequencies. But look at what you see. Do you not see the geometric shapes that we've talked about last week? They're all part of this whole process. Everything in our world vibrates. Everything has its own frequencies. These frequencies come in various shapes. You were made from a frequency. When God created the heavens and the earth way back in the beginning, he called out a frequency and that became a mountain. And he called out a frequency and that became an ocean. And he called out a frequency and that became a tree. And he called out, do you understand what I'm saying? Everything has a frequency. Everything. There is nothing that does not. Somatics. Here's the somatic. This is the sound of a dolphin. Remember how you can listen to the dolphins sing and chirp when they're in the water? Well, this is the sound of a dolphin singing. Look at the center. Geometric shapes. The dolphin is the only one who creates this shape. Now, they didn't put this into a pond with the dolphin. The water was placed on a plate, and what they did was they burst sound into the water. This is what they received after doing that. You could do the same thing with sand. You can do the same thing with crystal of any sort. But it's the idea is you're creating geometric shapes from sound. From sound. The higher the frequency, the more dramatic the shapes. Here's another one that was painted by Margaret Watts Hughes back in 1842 to 1907. It's published in a group of photos. I just took one of the photos out of it just to let you see what's going on. Basically, it's powder or a liquid of some sort that she put on a disc, and then she let it vibrate. And as it vibrated, this is what it began to create. So again, the particles arrange themselves. She didn't do that. The vibration caused the things to happen this way. So you're looking at flower patterns such as pansies, primroses, whatever have you. But again, it's inevitable that it will create its own shape by vibration. As we found ourselves moving as a society at a reckless speeds, it is worthwhile to explore the idea of the solfeggio frequencies. It's a fascinating realm. This is where I've been spending my evenings. It deals with the harmonizing of your mind, your body, and your spirit. Now, I can't explain what it does. I can explain to you that in my case, it causes me to relax. There are some frequencies like 432, which are designed to help you sleep. You don't need a sleeping pill. You just simply put this on, close your eyes, and listen to it. It helps if you're wearing headsets. I'll tell you that, because I've tried it with just putting it on a television and watching it, because there's also a light display that goes with it. Now, these 9 or 10 sounds that there's 9 is what I'm understanding, but some scientists are saying there's a 10th sound vibration that I have not understood. Imagine yourself right now in the air around you, besides my loud voice. Everything going on in that room is a frequency. you have all kinds of frequencies passing through the room. Now, when you're in your room and you don't want to listen to what you think is calm, you turn on the television set and you get a frequency. You turn on a radio, you get a frequency, and you're listening to a specific frequency. Every sound is still bouncing around in that room. All you've done is tune into one of the frequencies that are found in there. Everything then is about balancing our life with the frequencies that are most acceptable to us. For example, in the room you are sitting now, I already went through the slide a little bit, but I just want to do it again. You can't hear it, but you put this special little box in the room and turn it on and you hear music on a certain frequency, or you get in your car. Solfeggio frequencies have been the subject of scientific research, so I'm not making this stuff up. Now, to understand their impact on the mind and the body, these frequencies are also known as tones. And so they align the tones with what you need. These vibrations are said to interact with our internal energy system. Remember, we are energy. That little atom that's in us is vibrating. We have vibrations all throughout our body. What the solfeggio tones are doing is they're aligning our body, or joining with our body, creating for us a specific spiritual or physical feeling. Now, there are 9 of them that I know of. And so what I've done is I've given you a list here. Like 174 hertz is for physical pain relief and stress relief. Literally, I turned on 174 when I'm frustrated, and I listened to that for a half hour. Actually, it says you only have to listen to it 5 minutes, but I find myself accepting that frequency. 285 restores tissue and healing, restores it. 396 deals with guilt and fear. Everybody has guilt for something. If you find yourself feeling guilty about something that happened a long time ago, it doesn't have to happen today or yesterday. While you're in that feeling, turn on 396. 417 deals with trauma, specific kinds of trauma, accidents, death, whatever have you. 528, that's the one I was thinking of, deals with relaxation and sleep. 639, information and mental balance. What it's dealing with is actually the 2 halves of our brain. The 2 halves of the brain are tied together with the corpus callosum, which is a what I would call a root that goes from one side to the other. What it does is it's dealing with balancing out what's our creative side and our literal side. 741 deals with detoxification of the body, getting rid of nervous energy, cleaning out those things that are within you that you don't need. Or you can use 815, which deals with nervousness and anxiety. Again, many of them overlap, but it gives you a better understanding. The last one is 963, which is an increase in positive energy and deals with clarity. Now, the one that they're talking about adding is the one that's 1000. They say 1000 is the gateway to God. I've listened, but I can't see any clarity from it, but that's what it's called. So basically, you have 9 ways of dealing with stress of some sort built into your body. Remember, the earth itself has a frequency. You and I basically wear shoes and socks, and we never really touch the earth. So therefore, what happens is our energy doesn't match the earth's energy. Our energy matches whatever else is around us. And so there's a point in time when I find myself, even though I hate the grass down here called St. Augustine grass, I walk out in the grass to ground myself. I also bought a mat that I put my feet on in order to ground myself, to again bring myself into alignment with the earth. Have you ever heard the song Stairway to Heaven? It's written by Led Zeppelin. It's a long time ago. It's an old song, but the song deals with the fact that there's this greedy woman who becomes very optimistic, overly optimistic about her unpromising future. Well, the song resonates with people, and it did back when I was then, because it was dealing with the idea of transporting yourself to a spiritual or some sort of mystical form of life. Now, the words are kind of vague, but they give you the sense of going up. The only problem with the song is it's written in 440 hertz. 440 actually causes the body to become disoriented. Disorientation came by way of basically 1938, 39, when in Germany, Goebbels, who was I can't think of what his first name is, but anyway, he was the minister of advertisement or whatever have you. He was the one who brought everybody into line with music, with chanting. Remember in Germany how much noise was made, the clatter of the boots, the songs that were played, all of that was to disorient the body and to bring it into line with Hitler's words. Well, Rockefellers had the same idea. People, if you find out that you can heal yourself with music and with sound, what do you need medicines for? How many medicines could you eliminate if you find yourself regenerating each of your cells? Does it happen overnight? No. But the understanding is this is the way they began to heal themselves in ancient times. Okay. Basically, we all have vibrations. Some of us are high, some of us are low. So let me give you this understanding. Beware of your thoughts and your emotions, because you see, those are your frequencies of vibration. Those are the way you emit energy. And if you are thinking negative thoughts, guess what? You need to replace them. You need to replace them with positive thoughts. My wife reminded me that at the table tonight when I made a comment, but I'm not going to go that far because she said I shouldn't embarrass her. Second one is called spend time in nature. When I walk the dogs, the idea of being out, nature again is that frequency that I want to ground with. It's the natural frequency, and it will raise my body's frequency. So you can take a walk, go to the park, sit by the river, listen to the sound of the ocean is another way to do it. Or you can listen to music that resonates with you, songs that you feel in tune with. That's the kind of things. And if you can't figure out what you're in tune with, go to the 9 frequencies. If you go to YouTube, they're all listed there for you. And they tell you what they do. In fact, there's some there that don't tell you what they are. They just tell you what they are supposed to do. The next thing is you can either practice meditation, which we would probably call prayer, or yoga, which is the way of quieting our minds and raising our vibrations. Because in order to speak to God, you have to raise yourself to God. You draw yourself up. The last one is spend time with positive people. People you spend time with, they have a big impact on your vibration. So surround yourself with people who have a positive or an uplifting attitude. Those things are what's helping. I'm glad you stuck with me for that whole sermon. I will send envelopes around. You can fill those envelopes and send them back to me. Never mind. I never do that. But I just want you to understand there's a great deal to learn about light and sound and how they actually can help you get through. Now, if you don't have a copy of my lesson, I'm willing to send it to you and give it to you so that you have it, so that you can keep. Not that I'm the hardest person to understand, but as Ross was talking to me today, when I sent him 27 pages, he thought that was too many. But that's just Ross. Everybody else had no problem with it. But again, it was actually 2 lessons. Last week's lesson, which was about sight, which is also, again, about vibration, it's about frequency, it's about energy, and so is sound. All of them are very significant, and both of them are in Genesis chapter 1. From the very beginning, these are tools that God used, light and sound, in order to create what we are now sitting in. Now, if you begin to look at yourself, you say to yourself, well, I'm pretty physical, but actually you're made out of atoms, which are 99.99999%. Guess what? Air, nothing. Most of you is nothing. But what is there creates the image that we now see. Okay, I've talked for 45 minutes. I've left you with enough ideas. Mary Lou, what can you say to me?